Why do humans go rock climbing? Because rock fighting, rock eating, and rock fornicating didn't quite work. Human jokes. They are as ubiquitous in the known galaxy as humans themselves. If your world has a community of humans, as most do, then you are guaranteed to have heard at least a few. Jokes based upon a being species are by no means uniquely applied to humans. We all know the one about how the quickest way to turn two Drolka into one is to introduce them, or how the only thing a Felra hates more than having a bunch of horny sapients leering at her is having a bunch of horny sapients not leering at her. What sets the human jokes apart is the sheer variety of the traits they lampoon. Where other species-centric jokes tend to keep their focus to a single perceived characteristic or stereotype, such as Drolka fractiousness or Felra vanity, human jokes run a range of topics as diverse as the tellers themselves. This should not be surprising. Humans are above all else an adaptable species, making a place for themselves in nearly every galactic society. And yet, no matter how well they assimilate into a given non-human polity, they retain certain fundamental differences that can never be fully erased. It is perhaps this ability to be almost, but not quite us, that makes them so tempting a target for our humor. We see in them just enough of ourselves to make the joke relatable, like our own faces reflected in a distorting carnival mirror. The flaws and blemishes we fear will show on our own face scales. We project onto theirs. My human coworker claims to have invented a labor-saving device. He says he'll tell me about it tomorrow. He said the same thing yesterday and the day before. This is a popular joke in my native United Jixavan Republic. Laziness is seen as one of the cardinal sins by Jixavan culture, the others being incompetence, dishonest dealing, and sexual excess. Or, as we often list them, fucking off, fucking up, fucking over, and fucking constantly. Are humans any lazier than Jixavans? They are provably no less productive on average. But I can say, based on observation of my human wife and stepdaughter, that human productivity takes a different form than Jixavan. Where we apply steady effort in the most direct way to the accomplishment of a task, the human looks for the path of least resistance. They may take a longer indirect way to complete the same task that entails less overall work. Speaking generally, the Jixavan way is to try to minimize the time required to do a given task, whereas humans will try to minimize the energy required. For a Jixavan to do this habitually would give an impression of laziness. Contrast this attitude with the following joke from the Hruthnian majority Vroskin system, which appears to take issue with humans' perceived greed and parsimony while backhandedly granting them the virtue of industriousness. The Canyon of Majesty on Vroskin 2 used to be called the Dunes of Majesty, but a human lost a coin in the sand. Are humans excessively acquisitive or materialistic? Perhaps in the eyes of the Hruthnians. But in the eyes of the Vanga, humans do not understand materialism at all, at least if this joke is to be believed. A human was on a hunting trip when he slipped and fell into a quicksalt mire. A Vanga farmer heard his cries for help and pulled him out before he could drown. The human was grateful and swore that he would do anything to repay the farmer for saving him. The farmer said it wasn't necessary, but the human insisted. The farmer was a poor Vanga, but couldn't bring himself to ask for money. But he thought of his mate and cublings at home and how sparse the harvest looked. He decided that he wouldn't ask the human outright for anything, but would explain his situation and let the man choose for himself how he might help. I have only a small farm, the Vanga said. It is only a little patch of tuber fields, and my dairy herd has all died. But my neighbor to the north has dozens of herd beasts on his farm, and so does my neighbor to the south, and so does my cousin who owns the farm across the road. So, say no more, said the human with a big smile. I understand completely and will make this right for you. And then the human went around to the neighbors' farms and shot all of their herd beasts. So it seems as though the Vanga regard their human fellows as more spite-driven and violence-prone than greedy or slothful. But are they? One of the most popular stand-up comedians in the galaxy is the Tarkuj expatriate Haklaj Braken, and the routine he is most known for is his Fred the Human from down the street jokes. In Braken's telling, the eponymous Fred and his family are mostly good-natured bumblers, whose antics stem more from ignorance or an innate lack of sophistication than from malice, as in this story excerpted from Bracken's album Am I Right or Am I Awesome? Fred's got this uncle living with him now. The guy's only got one arm. He used to have two, but he was a security guard at a power tool factory that got robbed. The robbers took his handcuffs and locked his left wrist to a pipe on the wall and left him there. The good news was that there was a power saw within reaching distance of his right arm. The bad news was that he was a human. Yeah. Anyway, he was able to free himself and defeat the robbers, single-handedly. So I look out my window one morning, and Fred's one-armed uncle is climbing the fruit tree in front of my house. Hey, you live around humans, you get used to that. Primate's gonna primate, right? But my wife is all worried that he's gonna damage the tree and starts yelling at me about it. Okay, no problem. I can get him out of there. I just wait until the guy's looking at me, and I wave at him. 2 seconds later, whoomp! Yeah, just like the last 4 mornings. Now, Haklaj Bracken's humor is often panned by media critics as appealing to the lowest common denominator, and while that may be true, critics tend to focus on the lowest part of that term, where for our purposes the common denominator is the important aspect. Yes, Bracken's human jokes are relatively basic ones, with much of their entertainment value coming from his wry, world-weary delivery. But it remains true that a great many galactics from a huge range of species and cultures find these jokes relatable as the humans they live beside. It is an easy thing to picture one of the humans in your life as Fred from down the street, to see echoes of their often exasperating mix of good intentions and poor decisions exaggerated in one of Bracken's routines, and to understand the affectionate resignation with which he narrates Fred's antics. In a similar, though not identical vein of half-admiring annoyance, is this joke, which is common among most Jarg communities. The gods created the universe, but it failed to live up to their expectations, no matter what they did. They decided that they would punish the universe by making it feel the same frustration and disappointment that the gods felt, so they created the first Jarg. But while the Jarg certainly frustrated and disappointed the rest of the universe, he also frustrated and disappointed the gods. They decided to punish the Jarg by causing him frustration and disappointment, so they created the first human. Of course, the human's failings soon made it necessary to punish him with frustration and disappointment as well, so the gods afflicted him with other humans. The germ of this rather self-deprecating joke harkens back to the aphorism Jargs use to explain their often strained relations with their human neighbors. They are just like us in all the worst ways. Which is funny, because many humans say exactly the same thing about Jargs. But even the gentle Erythrians, who get along famously well with humans, are not above poking some fun at their allegedly chaotic nature. If you have a group of 20 humans in a room and the light goes out, how many of them will it take to replace the illumination cartridge? None. There will be no need for more light, because if you have that many humans in one place, something will already be on fire. Similarly, one of the rare examples of Crevan humor that is not math-related is this remark about their human compatriots. Hypothesis: the assertion that humans are unfailingly disruptive and problematic is untrue. Evidential statement: humans sometimes sleep. But if humans can be comparatively turbulent or rough-edged when seen through other eyes, not all of those eyes lack appreciation for those qualities. Take this joke from the Gonhir. 4 mercenaries are traveling aboard a starliner: a Dahu, a Jixavan, a Gonhir, and a human. They are drinking together in the ship's bar when the ship is suddenly captured and boarded by Rabathi slave raiders. The raiders start rounding up all the passengers and crew for mine stapling while the 4 mercenaries look on. They see that there are about 50 Rabathi soldiers, and that they are using a heavy-duty combat robot against any groups who resist them. "I only have my pistol," says the Dahu, "but even with just that, I'm still a match for 5 or 6 Rabathi. I'm willing to fight if you guys are." He chugs his drink and slams the mug on the table. But then he adds, "I don't know what I'll do about that combat bot." "Of course I'll fight," says the Jixavan. "I only have my vibro dagger, but even with just that I can take out 10 Rabathi." He chugs his drink and slams the mug on the table. But then he says, "I can't do more than scratch that combat bot, though." "You guys are wimps," says the Gonhir. "All I've got is my bare hands and the clothes on my back, but even so I can plow through 15 Rabathi before I go down. You boys need to step up your game." He chugs his drink and slams the empty mug on the table, then says, "I bet I can even leave a mark or two on that combat bot before it kills me." They look to the human, but his seat is empty, his mug is empty, and his clothes are in a pile on the floor. He is already on the other side of the room, fucking the combat robot into submission. Human sexuality is a feature in many popular jokes, as seen above. The most common appearance is in the form of the cliched, oversexed human who wants to have sex with everything. A stereotype that likely resulted from the human's open and accepting nature toward most xeno races, coupled with their lack of any biologically limited mating cycle. This stereotype is sometimes extrapolated into a more general view of human culture as being built on prurience and vulgarity, as in the following Dahu joke. A very rich human approached a Dahu artist about commissioning a painting to place at the entrance to his new estate. Since it would be the first thing seen by any visitors, he wanted something that would truly represent his conception of himself and his place in the galaxy, something that would establish the proper tone for the interactions he would have with those who came calling upon him. The human was willing to pay 1,000,000 standards for a painting that could truly convey his inner self. The Dahu was thrilled by the opportunity, so he spent several weeks researching the human, discovering his many businesses and interests. He used this knowledge to paint a portrait of the human as a mythical god of prosperity, surrounded by a garden of the fruits and produce of the many worlds on which the man did business, attended by servants representing the graces of industry, all in bold and vivid color, but with touches of both human classical and Dahu neo-allegorical revivalist styling. The human sent it back, saying it didn't represent his true self and to try again. The Dahu was upset because he had put a lot of work into that painting, but he went ahead and started another portrait. For this one, he researched the human's youth and upbringing. Using what he had learned, he painted the human as a young man in his childhood home, dreaming about the great things he would one day accomplish, using the placement and design of the everyday objects in the background to symbolize the various milestones and accomplishments in the man's life. The human sent it back, saying it still didn't represent his true self and to try again. By now, the Dahu artist was quite enraged. He had spent enormous amounts of time and effort on those two paintings, only to have his work casually dismissed. No more. He had better things to do than waste his time and talent on such a blockhead. He considered calling the human to let him know he was abandoning the commission, but then he had a better idea. He took a canvas, drew a crude penis on it, painted the words "fuck you" on it in every language he knew, and had that shipped to the rich human as a resignation letter. The human sent him a thank you note and a check for 1,000,000 standards. Another, somewhat opposed view of human sexuality is presented by this joke related by the Felra stand-up comedian Selthaya Renalari. Now I have betted my share of humans, and probably your shares too. And I have to say that for a Felra, having a human lover is a lot like putting a toddler at the controls of your starfighter. They're very enthusiastic about it. They'll get all excited looking at stuff and can't keep their hands off all the fascinating pretty bits that grab their attention. They'll poke everything, make all kinds of adorable noises, and leave a sticky mess. But they're unlikely to actually crank up the engine. If a weapon discharges, it will be at the wrong target, and probably too soon. And regardless, after a few minutes of playing, they'll be all done and ready for a nap. Sure, they're smiling and you're glad they're happy, but if you want to actually finish the mission, you'll just have to grab a joystick and do it yourself. Aside from their humor, the beauty and the value of jokes like these lies not in what they tell us about their intended targets, but in what they reveal about those who devise them, tell them, and recirculate them. For most beings, humor is a way of dealing with unsettling or disturbing concepts, of reducing the things we fear to a manageable state. And in this context, I do not mean the fear of humans themselves, although that may at times be an element. Rather, the fear of those traits which we jestingly apply to humans, but are afraid of manifesting in ourselves or those we esteem. We do not wish to be seen as indolent laggards, so we poke fun at the procrastinating human. We fear the loss of our emotional restraint, of our descent to violence and disorder, so we crack wise about the trigger-happy human. Thus, jokes such as these, made at the expense of those who are almost us, can provide a useful avenue to interrogate and deconstruct the parts of ourselves and our societies that we might prefer remain unexamined. We should consider ourselves fortunate that humans are such good sports about it.